Hello there, and welcome back to this quiet corner of the universe, where science slows its heartbeat, where history softens into a gentle whisper, and where you and I drift together through the mysteries that time has tried very, very hard to erase. Tonight, we're not simply traveling backward. We're not just watching the rise and fall of creatures or continents. We're doing something far more delicate, something almost impossible. We are stepping into the gaps, those blank, silent spaces where entire worlds once existed and then vanished as if they were never there. Imagine the story of Earth as a gigantic book, a book so ancient it stretches across billions of years. But when you open it, you discover most of the pages are missing. Some were burned by firestorms, others were crushed under mountains, others washed away by ancient seas. Some pages simply crumbled into dust, carried off by winds that blew long before humans took their first breath. And yet, despite all that loss, tiny fragments survived. A tooth here, a jawbone there, a fossil preserved only because it fell into a river at the perfect moment. We look at these fragments, these fragile clues, and we try to imagine the worlds they came from, worlds we can no longer see. Tonight, we're going to drift through a few of the quietest, most mysterious chapters in Earth's history. Moments when our planet was rewriting itself, forests burning, oceans shifting, continents drifting like slow, dreaming giants. Moments when life either blossomed in spectacular ways or disappeared without leaving a trace. We'll start with the fiery end of the dinosaurs, then walk through a warm, forgotten greenhouse world where crocodiles swam in Arctic rivers, then into the grassy plains where ancient apes began taking their first uncertain steps toward becoming human, and finally, into the ice ages, a time so recent that humans were already here, yet so strangely empty of evidence that it feels like history itself was holding its breath. So take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Allow the weight of today to slide off your mind. Because this journey isn't loud or dramatic, it's soft, like turning pages in a library that has been asleep for millions of years. And somewhere in those missing pages, somewhere in the spaces where science falls silent, our imagination finally gets to wander free. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin. Chapter 1. The Day the World Ended. There is a moment in Earth's history that feels almost too dramatic to be real, too sudden, too catastrophic, too precise, in the way it carved a thin boundary between the world that was and the world that would follow. And yet, it happened. Not slowly, not gradually, not through the quiet push of climate or the gentle creep of evolution. No, this ending came all at once, in a single, unimaginable instant. But before we step into that moment, let's drift back into the world as it existed just minutes before everything changed. Close your eyes, if you'd like, and picture the late Cretaceous, a warm, lush earth, forests breathing quietly under humid air, inland seas rippling with gentle tides, giant dinosaurs, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, tyrannosaurs moving across the land as casually as elephants stroll across the savannah today. Pterosaurs glide above coastal cliffs, huge marine reptiles prowl the oceans. Life is abundant, flourishing, confident. There is no warning, nothing in the wind, nothing in the sky, nothing in the subtle rhythms of the planet that hints at what is coming. If you were alive then, the world would feel simply normal. And then, somewhere far above, in the cold silence of space, a 6-mile-wide asteroid is streaking toward Earth. It has been falling for millions of years, pulled gradually by the sun's gravity, nudged by cosmic interactions into a trajectory so precise that missing Earth by a few thousand miles would have meant nothing more than a spectacular light show in the sky. But that's not what happens. It hits. And when it does, the impact releases more energy than 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. The numbers are almost meaningless at human scale. So let's slow it down and feel the moment. Imagine a mountain moving at 20 kilometers per second. Imagine a blast so powerful that the ocean itself vaporizes on contact. Imagine the ground liquefying beneath the shockwave. Imagine the atmosphere igniting. The crater it leaves behind, the Chicxulub crater, is 93 miles wide and 12 miles deep. Not a crater, a wound, a scar punched into the planet. But contrary to what we often imagine, the asteroid did not kill the dinosaurs directly. Not everywhere and not immediately. Yes, everything within hundreds of miles was obliterated, but dinosaurs thousands of miles away, grazing peacefully, hunting in forests, raising their young, survived the initial explosion. For a moment, it looked like the worst might be over, but it wasn't. The impact had hurled 25 trillion metric tons of debris into the sky. Vaporized rock, superheated dust, molten droplets of silica. These droplets arc upward into space before falling back down, heating the atmosphere into a global infrared oven. Forests ignite spontaneously. Animals, even those far from the crater, are suddenly breathing air hot enough to burn lungs. It's a world on fire. And then, almost as suddenly as the firestorm erupts, the world goes dark. The smallest dust particles, fine enough to remain suspended in the atmosphere, spread across the globe like a curtain. Sunlight dims, then disappears. Photosynthesis stops almost everywhere. Within days, temperatures begin to fall. Within weeks, ecosystems collapse. Scientists call this period impact winter, but the word winter feels too gentle. This was not a season. This was the closest Earth had come to dying in tens of millions of years. Plants starve first. Then, everything that depends on them. Herbivores weaken and fail. Predators hold on a little longer, but soon follow. By the time the dust finally settles, months, perhaps years later, 75% of all species on Earth are gone. Not weakened, not declining, gone. Wiped out in what geologists call an instant, which means a few thousand years, or maybe less. And yet, as strange as it sounds, this ending is also a beginning. Because in the ashes of the Cretaceous, in the quiet ruins of ecosystems that once flourished, something else is stirring. Something tiny, something unremarkable, something that had always lived in the shadows of giants. Small mammals, burrowers, insect eaters. Generalists begin to expand into niches left empty. Birds, descendants of the only dinosaurs to survive, start to radiate into new forms. Reptiles like crocodiles and turtles endure, protected by their ability to wait out long stretches of famine. The world is quiet, unrecognizable, and yet full of possibility. The age of dinosaurs ends. The age of mammals begins. And humans, very distant, very fragile, very improbable, have just been given their chance. But here is where the mystery begins to take shape. We can see the world before the impact clearly. We can see the devastation the asteroid caused. We can see the recovery millions of years later. But the transition, the first steps into a new world, is almost invisible. The fossil record goes dark, as if someone turned off the camera at the most important moment. Chapter 2 lives in that darkness. Chapter 2: Survivors in a Broken World. When the fires finally burned out, when the dust began slowly, hesitantly to settle, Earth emerged into a silence unlike anything in its history. A silence heavy not just with death, but with absence. The colossal creatures that had shaped ecosystems for 160 million years had vanished. Entire forests had burned to ash. Oceans were clouded with debris and dead plankton. Skies were dim, gray, and cold. But beneath this bleak surface, something gentle was happening. Life, small, quiet, and unexpected, was beginning to reclaim the world. Let's drift into this moment. Slowly, softly, as if we're walking through the smoldering ruins of an old forest at dawn. The ground is blackened. The trees are bare. The horizon is a hazy watercolor of gray and muted gold. But if you kneel and brush aside the ash, you might see something delicate. the curled green frond of a fern, pushing its way back into the light. Ferns were among the first to return. Their spores could survive fire. They could sprout, even in devastated soil. Ferns did not require stability, or sunlight, or even much warmth. All they needed was time. Soon, vast fern prairies spread across continents that once held mighty forests. The fossil record shows this clearly after the impact. There is a sudden, dramatic spike in fern spores. A fern spike so unmistakable that geologists use it as a marker of planetary catastrophe. But plants were only the beginning. Now imagine the animals. Not the giants. Not the predators. Not the armored or crested or horned. Imagine instead a shrew-sized mammal darting between rocks, its tiny feet scrabbling for seeds or insects. A small ground bird pecking at fallen debris, its feathers dull from soot. A turtle half buried in mud, waiting out the cold and hunger. A crocodile lurking in a riverbank, its metabolism slow enough to endure months without food. These were the survivors, and the common thread between them was not strength, but endurance. Animals that needed little, animals that could hide, animals that could eat almost anything, animals that could wait. When the world ended, specialization died, but flexibility lived. Still, survival did not mean comfort. The early Paleocene, the first 10 million years after the impact, was a time of confusion, instability, and ecological voids. Earth was recovering, but slowly. Climate remained unpredictable. Forests took centuries to regrow. Rivers changed course. Coastlines shifted. Predators vanished, leaving prey species disoriented. Herbivores starved. The balance of life had been broken. And yet, in this strange emptiness, opportunity blossomed. The mammals that survived the extinction had spent millions of years living small, living quiet, living in fear of dinosaurs. Their entire evolutionary history was shaped by predation pressure. They were nocturnal, nervous, tiny. Now imagine what happens when, suddenly, the thing that has always hunted you is gone. A new world opens. At first, growth is tentative. Mammals double in size over hundreds of thousands of years. Then they diversify. Those good at climbing move into regrowing forests. Those good at digging expand burrow networks. Those with strong jaws shift toward crushing seeds or eating nuts. Evolution moves slowly, but compared to the immense time scales of geology, this is rapid. Still, the Paleocene contains one of the greatest frustrations in paleontology. We can barely see it. The conditions after the impact were chaotic. Sediment layers were disrupted. River systems changed their flow. Fossilization became rare. We have snapshots. A skeleton here, a tooth there. But between these snapshots lie thousands of generations we cannot see. It's like watching a film where 90% of the frames are missing. We know mammals began to expand. We know birds diversified. We know ecosystems slowly rebuilt themselves. But the step-by-step story? Lost. And perhaps the most haunting part is this. Some animals that rose to prominence during the Paleocene thriving, diversifying, becoming common simply vanish from later layers of rock. Entire families, entire evolutionary experiments. They appear suddenly, they disappear just as suddenly, and we have no idea why. The mammals we now know, horses, whales, primates, cats, had not yet taken their familiar forms. But the roots of their story lie in this silent age, when life was improvising, experimenting, exploring. The Paleocene is the shadowed doorway between dinosaurs and modern life, a place where origins blur, transitions hide, and the most important developments unfold in near total scientific darkness. Which brings us to the next chapter, the moment when the world doesn't just recover, it transforms. Chapter 3. Paleocene. The first great time gap. If the aftermath of the asteroid impact was a world in shock, the Paleocene epoch was a world trying unevenly, tentatively to heal. From about 66 million to 56 million years ago, Earth was rebuilding itself in ways that are both beautiful and profoundly mysterious. Mysterious because, despite being one of the most important periods in mammalian evolution, the Paleocene left behind almost no fossil record. It is one of the great blank spaces in Earth's history. But before we explore why, let's drift gently into what the world felt like then. Imagine walking through a forest in the early Paleocene. The trees are young, thin, reaching upward with a kind of hopeful fragility. Ferns carpet the ground. Mushrooms burst from fallen logs. The air is damp and warm. The world is quiet. Not peaceful. Peace suggests a stable world. This world is unstable, recovering, unpredictable, but it is quiet in the way an abandoned place is quiet. Here and there, you might hear the rustling of a small mammal, a primitive primate-like creature leaping through branches, a little carnivore no bigger than a ferret hunting insects in the leaf litter, birds with long legs pecking at seeds, lizards sunning themselves on warm stones. The giants are gone, and into the emptiness left behind, life begins to adapt. Mammals, once tiny and humble, begin experimenting with new shapes and lifestyles. Some grow larger, some become climbers, some dig, some begin to glide, some evolve stronger jaws, some lengthen their limbs. It's an explosion of evolutionary creativity, but one that happens in shadows, behind a curtain of geological silence. And here is the central mystery. Why does the Paleocene leave behind so little evidence? There are three major reasons. 1. Chaos is a terrible preserver of history. After the impact, global erosion increased dramatically. Rivers surged, soils shifted, rainfall patterns changed. The environment's best at preserving fossils, quiet lake beds, gentle floodplains were unstable. Animals that lived in forests or uplands rarely fossilized. And much of the Paleocene world was exactly that. Unstable forests and shifting uplands. The result? Entire ecosystems vanished without leaving a trace. 2. Populations were tiny. With 75% of species gone, survivors were not thriving. They were holding on. Small populations mean fewer bodies. Fewer bodies mean fewer chances to fossilize. Even in the best of times, fossilization is rare. In a world recovering from catastrophe, it's almost non-existent. This alone could explain the thin fossil layers, but there is more. 3. Many environments where Paleocene life thrived were later destroyed. Earth does not sit still. During the Paleocene, mountains rose, sea levels changed, continents drifted, entire regions were eroded or buried. Crucial fossil beds may once have existed, then were erased from the geologic record, lost forever. Imagine writing a chapter of a book, and the paper itself dissolves. That is the Paleocene. Ghost lineages. One of the most haunting concepts in paleontology comes from this epoch: ghost lineages. These are evolutionary lines we know must have existed, because later fossils show clear descendants, but the ancestors are gone. We see a creature in the early Eocene with a certain trait. We know it evolved from something earlier, but the something earlier has no fossils. It is a ghost, and the Paleocene is full of them. Primates, hoofed mammals, carnivores, rodents, even early relatives of whales. All of them must have existed, but the record is almost silent. It is as if the camera capturing Earth's story went blurry for 10 million years. Life goes wild behind the curtain, and yet, despite the missing evidence, we know incredible things were happening. Because when the Eocene begins, life suddenly appears in forms that are more advanced, more diverse, more specialized than anything seen earlier. How did mammals go from rat-sized burrowers to the ancestors of horses, whales, bats, primates, cats, and more, all in 10 million years? We don't know. We can guess. We can model. We can infer. We can speculate. But the actual sequence of transitions is hidden. For paleontologists, the Paleocene is both haunting and tantalizing. A quiet world, a fragile world, a world rebuilding itself from near annihilation, and yet, a world that refuses to let us see how it happened. Somewhere in those lost forests, the story of modern mammals began. Somewhere in that silence, the seeds of our own eventual existence were planted. But the next epoch, the Eocene, will feel less like a recovery and more like a dream, where Earth becomes a greenhouse planet, warm from pole to pole, bursting with life in forms that seem almost alien compared to today. And yet again, most of the evidence dissolves before it reaches us. Chapter 4. Eocene, a greenhouse planet of dreams. If the Paleocene was Earth taking its first hesitant breaths after catastrophe, then the Eocene, stretching from about 56 million to 34 million years ago, was Earth inhaling deeply, warming, swelling with life, and blooming into something almost surreal. It was a time when the planet, in its own strange way, became a dream, lush, humid, glowing with heat, and filled with creatures that seem, from our modern perspective, almost imaginary. To understand the Eocene, you must abandon everything you associate with climate today. Forget polar ice caps, forget frigid winters, forget frozen tundra, alpine snow, and seasonal cold. The Earth of the Eocene was a true greenhouse world, not metaphorically, not regionally, but entirely. There was no ice anywhere on the planet, not in the Arctic, not in Antarctica, not on mountaintops. None. Temperatures were so warm that the difference between the equator and the poles, the gradient that drives our winds, storms, and seasons, was strangely small. If you lived in Alaska during the Eocene, your year-round temperatures would hover around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine that. Balmy, humid evenings under a midnight sun. Imagine palm trees, actual palm trees, rustling softly on Arctic shores. Earth had become a world without winter, a world without cold, but a world full of life. Let's drift into this dreamlike planet together, slowly and gently, and feel what it might have been like to stand there. A jungle planet. Picture a North America so warm and forested that crocodiles live in rivers where snow now falls. Picture Europe as a chain of tropical islands. Picture India racing toward Asia, carrying its own forests and animals aboard an isolated landmass like a drifting biological ark. Rainforests didn't just exist in the tropics, they covered vast regions of Earth. Thick canopies filtered sunlight into soft emerald glows. Giant insects buzzed. Small mammals leapt from branch to branch. The air was thick with pollen, moisture, and the smell of warm vegetation. If you were to stand in the Eocene forest of what is now Wyoming, you would hear birdsong, primate calls, insects humming, leaves whispering, and you would sweat from the constant warmth. Even the nights were warm. Even the winters were gentle. Seasonal variation barely existed. And in these forests lived some of the strangest creatures in mammalian history. Horses the size of dogs. The earliest horses, like Eohippus, were tiny, no larger than a house cat or a small dog. They tiptoed delicately on padded feet with multiple toes. Not grazers of open plains, those ecosystems didn't exist yet, but nimble browsers of lush undergrowth. They weren't alone. The ancestors of rhinos looked nothing like rhinos. The ancestors of whales still walked on land. The ancestors of modern primates, our own distant kin, were experimenting with new ways of living in trees, jumping, climbing, developing depth perception, and grasping hands. It was a time of biological experimentation, a time when mammals, freed from the constraints of dinosaur rule, tested every possible evolutionary path. The world was open. The world was warm. The world invited exploration. Whales walked on land. One of the most astonishing stories of the Eocene is the birth of whales. Today, whales feel like the ultimate expression of ocean life, vast, fluid, graceful. But in the Eocene, they were newcomers to the sea. The earliest whales, like Pachycetus, lived on land and only hunted in shallow waters. They had long snouts filled with sharp teeth, wolf-like bodies, and legs strong enough to walk. Not yet swimmers, not yet giants, just curious land mammals drawn increasingly toward water. As the Eocene progressed, we see creatures like Ambulocetus, literally the walking whale, with limbs capable of swimming like seals, but still able to support its weight on land. Later, whales became more aquatic. Rhodhocetus mastered swimming. Basilosaurus grew long, serpent-like, fully oceanic, and nearly 50 feet in length. And yet, the transitional fossils between these key forms are sparse, hauntingly so. We see each stage separated by geological blinks, but the smooth storyline between them is missing. The Eocene is full of beginnings we cannot fully see. Predators from another timeline. Before cats and dogs, before bears and hyenas, Earth was ruled by a different lineage of carnivore-like mammals, the creodonts. Some were sleek and wolf-like, others hulking and bear-like. Still others were built like weasels or wolverines. They dominated for millions of years, then vanished. Why? We don't know. Their fossils appear, then disappear, leaving behind puzzling gaps. No clear ancestors, no clear descendants, just a long, strange dynasty of predators that flourished in the warmth of the Eocene and then faded. Alongside them lived the Brontotheras, gigantic herbivores resembling rhinos with elaborate forked horns. Some reached the height of modern elephants. They too appear suddenly in the fossil record, diversify into dozens of species, dominate entire regions, and then, around 34 million years ago, vanish almost overnight. Again, the story is incomplete, the pages missing, the reasons hidden. The Eocene is a world of dramatic entrances and mysterious exits. Why the Eocene record is broken. Despite the abundance of life, the Eocene fossil record is frustratingly sparse. Warm, wet tropical environments are terrible for preserving fossils. Bones decay rapidly in humid air. Soils rich in organic acid dissolve skeletal remains. Constant plant growth churns the ground, destroying burial sites. And tectonic activity, mountain building, volcanic eruptions, shifting continents buried or destroyed many fossils that did form. The result? The Eocene is a lush, vivid world we can imagine, but can only see in fragments. Like a dream you remember upon waking, vivid in emotion, vague in detail. A planet teetering on balance. The warmth of the Eocene wasn't just a pleasant planetary accident. It was precarious, delicate, driven by greenhouse gases and feedback loops we still don't fully understand. And eventually, the warmth faded. Slowly at first, then dramatically. Around 34 million years ago, something shifted. Ocean currents changed. Antarctica began to freeze. The dreamlike Eocene world unraveled. Forests retracted. Grasslands emerged. New climates, new pressures, new opportunities arose. And the next epoch, the Oligocene, would reshape life once again. But before we step into that transition, we need to drift deeper into the next great mystery. Chapter 5. When Earth cooled and the apes emerged. I will continue immediately. Chapter 5. Cooling worlds and ghost apes. Oligocene, Miocene. When the Eocene came to a close, Earth seemed to exhale. A long, cooling breath that would change everything. For tens of millions of years, the planet had enjoyed a greenhouse warmth so stable and so universal that tropical forests grew in the Arctic. But around 34 million years ago, something shifted. The dream began to fade. The transition into the Oligocene was not gentle. It was abrupt, chaotic, transformative, and in its tumult, entire chapters of evolutionary history were lost, including the early origins of the creatures who would one day become humans. The first ice. Imagine Antarctica not as a frozen wasteland, but as a vibrant land of rivers and forests. Now, imagine those forests dying, the rivers freezing, snow accumulating, year after year, until ice sheets miles thick covered the continent. This happened astonishingly fast in geological terms. One moment, Antarctica was green. The next, it was encased in ice. Ocean currents reorganized around this new frozen mass, redirecting warmth and moisture worldwide. Sea levels fell. Climate patterns destabilized. Globally, ecosystems changed faster than many species could adapt. And as the world cooled, forests shrank. For the first time in tens of millions of years, Earth became a planet of contrasts. Warm tropics, cool, temperate zones, and frigid poles. This shift set the stage for one of the most profound transformations in the history of mammals. The rise of grasslands. When the forests died back, as forests contracted, new environments emerged. Open spaces, sunlit expanses, shrubs, prairies. Eventually, true grasslands, vast, rolling ecosystems stretching toward the horizon. But grasses weren't just new vegetation, they were architects. Grasses encouraged the evolution of grazing herbivores with specialized teeth, fast-running predators, burrowing animals, herd behavior, long-distance migration. The world was reorganizing itself into the ecosystems we recognize today. But as life diversified, the fossil record grew thinner. The lost dawn of apes. Somewhere between 25 and 5 million years ago, the ancestors of apes, and eventually, humans, began to evolve. This period spans the late Oligocene and much of the Miocene, and yet, we know almost nothing about it. We should have fossils documenting the first true apes, the early split between monkeys and apes, the rise of the lineage that led to gorillas, the lineage that led to chimps, the lineage that led to humans. But instead, we find almost nothing, just scattered teeth, partial jaws, a few limb fragments. A handful of fossils represent millions of years. It is one of the most astonishing gaps in the entire history of life. We call these missing branches ghost lineages. Evolutionary lines we know must have existed because later fossils require them, but which left behind no trace we can find. It's like knowing a bridge must have once existed because two roads line up perfectly, but finding no wood, no rope, no supports, nothing at all. Why the fossil record vanished? Several forces conspired to erase the story of early apes. 1. Uplift and erosion. Africa and Eurasia were undergoing massive tectonic change. Mountains rising, valleys forming, rivers cutting deep channels. Fossil-bearing sediments were destroyed, buried, or eroded. 2. Climate instability. Repeated cycles of warming and cooling made stable fossil environments rare. Lakebeds dried, wetlands shifted, floodplains moved. 3. Forest habitat loss. Early apes lived in trees. Trees do not preserve fossils well. When an ape fell from a tree and died, scavengers dismantled the body. Weather dissolved the bones. Acidic soils erased the remains. Unless the body fell into a river, lake, or volcanic ash bed, nothing was preserved. 4. Population sizes were small. Apes were never abundant. They reproduced slowly, lived in small groups, and ranged widely. Tiny populations equals tiny fossil chances. Together, these forces created a near-total erasure of early ape evolution, the Miocene explosion. Around 20 million years ago, something remarkable happened. Apes suddenly appear across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Not gradually, not sparsely. Suddenly, dozens of species. Some massive, like Gigantopithecus, the largest ape ever known. Some tiny and monkey-like. Some tree-dwellers. Some ground walkers. Some with traits linking them to modern apes. It is clear these species had been evolving for millions of years beforehand. But their ancestors, the transitional forms linking them back to early primates, are missing. We see the result of the story, but not the beginning. Like opening a book to chapter 6 and realizing the first 5 chapters aren't just gone, they may never be recoverable. Grasslands and bipedal beginnings. As grasslands spread, some apes were forced out of trees. Not entirely, not suddenly, but gradually over millions of years. Walking upright on 2 legs may have begun as a simple advantage. Reaching higher fruit, carrying food, reducing heat exposure, or seeing over tall grass. But again, we lack fossils documenting these earliest stages. The first clear evidence of bipedal ancestors appears only around 6-7 million years ago, and even that record is fragmentary. Lost ecosystems, lost stories. The Oligocene and Miocene reshaped Earth's ecosystems. Horses transformed from forest dwellers, with multiple toes, into single-toed runners. Elephants evolved trunks and huge bodies. Cats and dogs diverged. Modern birds radiated. Whales perfected their oceanic forms. But in each of these stories, there are gaps, missing transitions, unknown ancestors. Entire lineages appear and disappear with no explanation. The most dramatic missing story, however, is ours. The story of the apes who became human begins in the Miocene, but the details remain hidden behind 20 million years of geological erasure, a quiet prelude to humanity. By the end of the Miocene, around 5 million years ago, a few ape species in Africa began to change more dramatically. Their pelvis and spine adapted slightly for upright walking. Their canines shrank. Their diets diversified. Their environments opened. They were not human, not even close. But they were no longer entirely ape-like, either. They were something in between, something new, the earliest echoes of us. But to truly meet them, we must step into the next epoch, a time when the world shifted yet again, when the forests and grasslands of Africa forced our ancestors into forms that would eventually lead to Homo. And yet, this next chapter is also painfully incomplete. Almost all early human evolution is lost to time. The next chapter reveals why. Chapter 6. Pliocene. When apes became almost human. The Pliocene begins around 5.3 million years ago, and with it comes a subtle but profound shift in the story of life. Earth has cooled. Grasslands have spread across Africa and large portions of Asia. Forests retreat into fragmented patches, thin ribbons of green threading across a landscape that is increasingly open, exposed, and unpredictable. This new world is not gentle. It does not offer safety in numbers or shelter in endless canopies. It does not nurture small, tree-dwelling primates who cling to branches and sleep in leafy nests. Instead, it challenges them. And in that challenge, the first humans begin to take shape. Not suddenly, not consciously, not with purpose, but with each generation quietly adapting to a world that demands different skills, different bodies, different minds. Let's drift into that world now slowly, softly, as if moving through the warm morning light of a Pliocene savanna. The first steps toward humanity. The earliest creatures that resemble our lineage belong to genera like Ardipithecus, Orrorin, and Sahelanthropus. They were not human. They were not chimpanzees. They were not ancestors we would immediately recognize. But the hints are unmistakable. The base of the skull suggests upright posture. The femur angles inward for bipedal walking. The pelvis widens, balancing the body over 2 legs. The foot arches slightly, not fully taking the first steps toward true human gait. They moved awkwardly, with a posture halfway between ape and human. They climbed trees for safety but walked upright when crossing open ground. Their hands curled easily around branches, but their fingers were shorter, better suited for manipulation. They were experiments. Evolutionary bridges, not quite one thing or the other. And almost everything about them is missing from the record. For each species, we have only fragments. The whisper of a skeleton, a shattered skull, a partial pelvis, a handful of teeth. To imagine their lives, we must walk through a world that hides more than it reveals. An unsteady landscape. The Rift Valley is a geological wound, torn open by the slow pulling apart of the African continent. In the Pliocene, it was a place of constant transformation, volcanoes erupting in sudden fury, earthquakes, fracturing plateaus, lakes forming, shrinking, vanishing, dust storms sweeping across plains, rivers carving deep gorges, fresh water turning brackish, then sweet again. Life at the edge of such instability is both fragile and creative. Species adapt quickly or disappear entirely. Isolated populations split and evolve along separate paths. Small changes accumulate. Longer legs, more dexterous hands, slightly larger brains. For our ancestors, it was a crucible, a place that burned away old forms and forced new ones into existence. But it was also a place where bones rarely survived long enough to fossilize. The same tectonics that shaped our evolution also erased its evidence. Why bipedalism? One of the deepest mysteries of human evolution is not how we came to walk upright, but why. Many possibilities ripple through scientific thought. Energy efficiency in open environments. Walking upright uses far less energy than knuckle walking over long distances. Heat regulation. Standing upright reduces sun exposure, allowing early hominins to stay cooler under intense heat, freeing the hands for carrying food, infants, stone tools, branches, or scavenged meat. Seeing over tall grass, a height advantage in a world of predators. Foraging flexibility, reaching fruits higher in trees or branches, wading in shallow waters. An elegant theory. Early hominins walked upright while foraging along shorelines. Perhaps all these factors played a part, perhaps none did. Evolution seldom works in straight lines or simple answers. But what we know is that by the Middle Pliocene, upright walking was becoming the norm for multiple hominin species. The shape of the knee, the curvature of the spine, the angle of the femur, the widening of the pelvis, the shortening of the toes. Piece by piece, the blueprint of the human body emerged. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Australopithecines, the first to flourish. Around 4 million years ago, a new form appears, one we recognize more clearly. Australopithecus. They walked fully upright. They had human-like hips and legs. Their brains were still small, larger than chimps, smaller than ours, but their faces were beginning to shorten, their jaws changing, their teeth adapting to mixed diets of fruit, roots, seeds, tubers, and tough grasses. Australopithecus afarensis, the species of the famous Lucy, lives in this era. Lucy was small, only about 3.5 feet tall. She walked upright, with a swaying, deliberate gait. She climbed trees to sleep safely. Her hands were capable of both climbing and manipulation. When scientists discovered her skeleton in 1974, it felt like a miracle. Not because she was complete. She was only 40% intact, but because any hominin skeleton survives at all is nearly impossible. Lucy is a window into a world full of others like her. Children playing with sticks, females carrying infants on their hips, males foraging for honey, termites, small animals, roots, groups navigating the dangers of open-ground leopards, hyenas, giant snakes, droughts. Their lives were short, likely filled with fear and hardship, but they persevered. They carried with them the seeds of our future, tools older than humans. For a long time, scientists believed that Homo, our own genus, was the first to make stone tools. But discoveries from the Pliocene suggest something surprising. Tools may predate humans. Simple stone flakes found in Kenya, dating back nearly 3.3 million years, come from a time before Homo existed. Who made them? Australopithecines? Another unknown species? The makers are ghosts. The tools remain. This challenges our assumptions about intelligence, about creativity, about the uniqueness of our lineage. Stone tools did not begin with humans. They began with our cousins, our ancestors, our forgotten kin. The slow growth of the brain. During the Pliocene, the brain grows modestly. Chimp to 400 cubic centimeters. Australopith to 455 cubic centimeters. Early Homo to 600 cubic centimeters. Modern human to 1,350 cubic centimeters. Brains grew slowly at first, much more slowly than culture, behavior, or anatomy. This reveals something important. Walking upright came long before intelligence. Hands adapted before brains did. Tools appeared before language. Cooperation and social living preceded abstract thought. The human story is one of gradual assembly, a patchwork of abilities coming together long before they formed a cohesive whole. Hardship as the teacher. The Pliocene was a time of droughts, fluctuating climates, and unstable ecosystems. Our ancestors faced near constant threat: predators, starvation, disease, environmental stress, competition from other primates. But hardship breeds adaptation, and adaptation shapes destiny. The challenges of the Pliocene forged resilience, cooperation, social bonds, problem-solving, and the first glimmers of culture. Not written culture, not language, not art, but the foundation upon which all those would one day be built. A world preparing for humans. By 2.6 million years ago, at the close of the Pliocene, the stage was set. Forests had thinned, grasslands expanded, climate cycles sharpened, hominins diversified, stone tools spread, brains enlarged, bodies adapted, hands refined, social groups grew more complex. The next epoch, the Pleistocene, would take these raw beginnings and mold them into something unmistakable: humans. But the Pleistocene also holds its own mysteries. It is a world of ice, of megafauna, of lost human species, and of drowned landscapes that conceal almost the entire story of early humanity. To understand the missing chapters of our past, we now drift into Chapter 7, Pleistocene, the Age of Ice, Shadows, and Hidden Human Histories. The Pleistocene begins quietly, not with a sudden cataclysm, not with a volcanic roar or an asteroid impact, but with temperatures dropping, slowly, invisibly, like a whisper passing through the atmosphere. The world cools, moisture gathers, snow falls not only in winter, but in spring, in autumn, in seasons with no name. And that snow does not melt. Layer upon layer accumulates, then compresses, then becomes ice. Ice miles thick, ice heavy enough to carve mountains, ice vast enough to reshape continents. Welcome to the Pleistocene, the age of ice, the age of giants, the age of humans rising quietly in the shadows of a frozen world. The Pleistocene spans 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, but in this chapter, time loses its urgency. We drift through millennia as if floating through a cold, ancient dream, a world wrapped in winter. Ice sheets advance across the northern hemisphere, swallowing entire landscapes under white silence. All of Canada and Alaska, northern Europe, Scandinavia and Siberia, Britain and Ireland, parts of Germany, Poland, Russia, Mongolia. During the glacial peaks, these regions are uninhabitable, nothing but frozen deserts marked by howling winds. But just beyond the ice lie vast tundras and mammoth steppes, not barren, not lifeless, but impossibly rich. Grasses stretch across thousands of miles, nutrient-dense, wind-resistant, thriving in the cold. And upon these grasslands walk some of the most astonishing creatures Earth has ever produced. Mammoths with thick fur and curved tusks, woolly rhinoceroses, giant ground sloths taller than human houses, saber-toothed cats the size of modern tigers, short-faced bears, towering, fast, deadly, cave lions, larger than African lions, aurochs, massive wild cattle, giant elk, with antlers spanning 12 feet. The Pleistocene is not a time of silence. It is loud with life, heavy, breathing, thundering life. But this world is unstable. Not steady ice, not constant warmth. Glaciers advance, then retreat. Sea levels drop hundreds of feet, then rise. Coastlines shift, rivers change course. Deserts bloom, then vanish. Every 100,000 years, the world transforms. A pulse of warming, then cooling, then warming again. These oscillations shape everything, including the rise of our species, the fractured human family. The Pleistocene is when humanity, the full human family, finally steps onto the stage, not as one species, but as many. We often imagine our lineage as a straight line, ape, Australopithecus, Homo us. But the truth is far more beautiful and far more complex. During the Pleistocene, at least a dozen human species may have existed: Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthalensis, Neanderthals, Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, Homo luzonensis, Homo naledi, Denisovans, Homo sapiens, plus ghost lineages we haven't found yet. Imagine that for a moment. The world filled with different kinds of humans, different faces, different builds, different minds. Some stood nearly 7 feet tall, others stood barely 3. Some had immense chests for cold climates, others long limbs for heat. Some carved delicate tools, others mastered fire, others built boats. They were all human, and they all lived at the same time. Most of them left almost no trace. Why the record is broken? The Pleistocene should be the best documented chapter in human evolution. It's recent. It's filled with human species. It covers landscapes where millions of individuals lived. And yet, it is full of enormous gaps. Why? Because the world itself erased the evidence. 1. Ice sheets destroyed northern evidence. As glaciers advanced, they acted like planetary bulldozers, scraping continents bare, crushing sediments, pulverizing fossils, grinding bones into dust, erasing entire ecosystems. Everything humans built or left behind in northern latitudes simply vanished. 2. Tropical zones are anti-fossil environments. Humans evolved in Africa and Southeast Asia, where humidity, heat, and acidic soils dissolve bone rapidly. Bodies decay within weeks. Organic materials vanish. Sediments churn and destroy evidence. 3. Human populations were small. For tens of thousands of years, the global human population was often below 100,000 individuals. A tiny species leaves tiny traces. 4. Sea levels hid everything humans loved. During cold periods, the coastlines were far, far away, exposing enormous plains that are now underwater. The Bering Land Bridge, Sunderland, Southeast Asia, the Persian Gulf Basin, the North Sea Plains, Australia and New Guinea connected. The Caribbean expanded justed. Huge Mediterranean coastlines. These were prime human habitats. Rich food, stable temperatures, abundant water. Today, they lie beneath hundreds of feet of ocean, almost untouched, almost completely unexplored. The story of early humans is down there, still sealed away beneath the waves. Neanderthals, the ice-born humans. The Neanderthals appear around 400,000 years ago. They are not brutish. They are not primitive. They are not failed humans. They are simply different. Neanderthals were shaped by ice. Massive rib cages, short limbs, powerful muscles, dense bones, enormous noses to humidify cold air, brains larger than ours. They mastered fire, pigments, ritual burials. They made art deep in caves. They cared for their injured. They hunted mammoths with coordinated strategies. They were extraordinary. And yet, from them we have only fragments. skulls, a few thousand bones, some tools, cave sediments, traces of DNA, footprints in ancient mud, a species that lasted 300,000 years, and we can barely picture their faces. The Denisovans, the humans we almost missed entirely. In 2008, inside a cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, a researcher sifted through what looked like a small brown pebble. It was not a pebble, it was a fragment of a finger bone. That tiny bone, barely a centimeter across, held the genome of a completely unknown human species. No skeleton, no skull, no tools, no settlement, only one finger bone, 3 teeth, and a fragment of skull. From that, we learn Denisovans, mated with Neanderthals and modern humans, lived across Asia, and left genetic legacies in Tibetans, Papuans, indigenous Australians, and Filipinos. They may have built boats, they may have lived in high mountains, they may have been giants. Everything else about them is silence. The hobbits and the hidden peoples. On the island of Flores, in Indonesia, scientists found tiny stone tools long before they found the toolmakers. When bones finally surfaced, the world was stunned. Homo floresiensis, 3 feet tall, brains the size of grapefruits, yet able to make advanced tools, yet able to hunt dwarf elephants. Even stranger, they survived until at least 50,000 years ago, when modern humans had already spread through Asia. On another island, Luzon researchers found a different unknown species, Homo luzonensis, also small-bodied, unique, mysterious. In Africa, a deep cave revealed Homo naledi, with hands for climbing, feet for walking, and brains far too small for their complex behaviors. The Pleistocene wasn't a lonely world. It was a crowded one, filled with lost cousins. But almost none of their stories survive. Where are all the settlements? This is the uncomfortable mystery. During the Pleistocene, humans hunted megafauna, crafted stone tools, controlled fire, traveled long distances, likely built shelters and buried their dead, created art, crossed oceans, colonized continents. But archaeological sites older than 50,000 years are incredibly rare, shockingly rare. Why? 1. Sea level rise drowned early human coasts. Most hunter-gatherer settlements were near water, coasts, lakes, rivers. When the ice melted, those places vanished beneath the sea. 2. Glaciers cleared entire continents. North America, Northern Europe, Siberia, all wiped clean. 3. Wildfire cycles destroyed organic material. Grasslands and savannas burn. Fire erases. 4. Humans were nomadic. Nomadic people leave faint signatures. Generations pass without any lasting footprint. 5. Time destroys everything human. Stone survives, but wood, a rope, hide, fiber, baskets, tents, huts, clothing, all vanish. Imagine trying to understand medieval Europe if all wood, leather, cloth, and metal decayed, leaving only scattered stone knives. That is the Pleistocene record, the megafaunal mystery. Between 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, something devastating happened. Earth's great giants died. Every continent except Africa lost most of its megafauna. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, cave bears, giant kangaroos, glyptodons, Irish elk, American lions, woolly rhinoceros. Why? We don't know. Theories include human hunting, climate change, disease, ecosystem collapse, comet impact, synergy of multiple causes, but the evidence is thin. If humans hunted them to extinction, where are the thousands of kill sites? If climate killed them, why did Africa's megafauna survive? If disease was responsible, what infection can jump across continents without modern travel? The truth remains hidden. Another gap, another question, another silence in deep time. the first modern humans. Around 300,000 years ago, our species Homo sapiens appears in Africa, but the earliest skeletal evidence is spare. Some skull fragments, partial skeletons, teeth. The earliest signs of symbolic behavior, pigments, art, decorations, are also scarce. It is as if early modern humans walked lightly upon the earth, leaving almost nothing behind. At 70,000 years ago, something changes. Population growth, migration, technological innovation, complex language, cultural identity, symbolic creativity, long-distance trade. Humans spread into Arabia, across India, into Southeast Asia, through Europe, into Australia, eventually into the Americas. But each step of that journey is missing enormous parts. There are vast stretches of time where humans existed, but the Earth records nothing. The end of the Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago, a final warming pulse sweeps across the world. Ice retreats, forests expand, grasslands shrink, sea levels rise fast, catastrophically fast. Coastal landscapes vanish, land bridges disappear, continents shrink, rain patterns shift, human populations adapt. Some move inland, some follow the coasts, some turn to farming, some continue hunting, some vanish from the record. The Pleistocene ends quietly. The Holocene begins. Humanity carries with it all the ghosts of the Ice Age. Species we never met, cultures we never recorded, landscapes we never saw. We step into the present with a deep, unresolved past trailing behind us. The Pleistocene leaves us not with answers, but with questions. Where did we come from? How many human species lived alongside us? What worlds vanished beneath the seas? And what will we never know? Chapter 8. The Holocene. When warmth returned and memory began to fade. The Holocene begins with water. Not gentle water, not the quiet drip of melting icicles or the slow thawing of frozen rivers. It begins with walls of water, oceans rising, coastlines collapsing, entire landscapes drowning beneath the incoming tides of a warming world. Around 11,700 years ago, the last ice age ends. The snow retreats, winters soften, warmth spreads across the continents like a breath long held and finally exhaled. And with that warmth comes transformation, not only of climate and ecosystems, but of humanity itself. The Holocene is the time when humans begin shaping the world in ways no species ever has. But ironically, it is also the moment when evidence of our early achievements begins slipping from our grasp, disappearing beneath oceans and deserts and soils that refuse to preserve the traces of the past. To understand how the modern world emerged, we must float slowly into this new epoch, one warmed by sunlight, but haunted by everything we lost in the thaw. A planet resetting itself. As Earth warms, the ice sheets that blanketed the northern hemisphere begin to collapse. Not gradually, sometimes catastrophically. Imagine standing on a cold morning in prehistoric Canada, watching the horizon shimmer, and then realizing the shimmer is not sunlight on snow, but water. Glacial lakes, held in place by the edges of ice sheets, burst like broken dams. Lake Agassiz, Lake Ojibwe, Lake Missoula, Lake Lahontan, each one releasing more water than all modern rivers combined. These floods reshape continents in hours. They carve canyons, they drown valleys, they erase everything humans left in their wake. Millions of artifacts gone, campsites gone, footprints gone. Humanity survives, but its early story is swept away. The drowned world. When sea levels rise by 400 feet, it is not a gentle rise. It is the swallowing of entire worlds. During the Ice Age, Britain was connected to Europe by Doggerland. Japan was part of the Asian mainland. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Australia formed one landmass, Sunderland. Siberia and Alaska formed Beringia. The Persian Gulf was a fertile valley park. The Caribbean was larger, dotted with human camps. India's coastline extended dozens of miles further out. Egypt had vast coastal plains now long gone. Humans lived there. They thrived there. They built shelters. They hunted. They fished. They carved tools. They sang around fires. And as the seas rose, all of it, every settlement, every hearth, every fragment of early history slipped beneath the waves. Today, archaeologists have explored less than 1% of submerged prehistoric coastlines. The rest is still hidden under silt, coral, sand dunes, deep ocean currents. The birthplace of coastal cultures lies under the sea. We stand on the shore of the Holocene, but our true beginning might be underwater. The rise of warmth and the expansion of life. The Holocene is a gift of warmth. Forests return. Grasslands spread. Rivers stabilize. Rainfall patterns settle. Coasts find new shapes. Large animals once threatened by glacial instability now flourish. Elephants, lions, bison, wolves, elk, bears. The megafauna that survived the extinction pulse adapt to the new world. Those too specialized for the cold disappear. Nature, once defined by ice, becomes a world of growing abundance. And humans begin to do something extraordinary. Instead of adapting to nature, they begin to adapt nature to themselves. Agriculture, humanity's first great transformation. The transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer is often portrayed as a sudden revolution, but in reality, it took thousands of years. A slow dance between people and plants. Early agriculture appears in multiple places, independently. The Fertile Crescent, wheat, barley. China, rice, millet. Africa, sorghum. Mesoamerica, maize. The Andes, potatoes, quinoa. New Guinea, yams, bananas. Hunters and gatherers notice patterns. Grains regrow if left in the soil. Certain plants thrive near water. Seeds scattered intentionally sprout next season. Animals follow predictable paths. They begin tending the plants, then protecting them, then altering them. Humanity's first engineered organisms are crops not by science, but by time. But this agricultural rise leaves very little archaeological evidence. Why? Because early farms were made of wood, built with mud, shaped by ditches and small fences, located on fertile floodplains, floodplains that flood, floodplains that bury, floodplains that erode. The first farms, the true beginning of civilization, lie hidden beneath thousands of years of silt. The first villages, then towns, then cities. The moment humans begin settling in one place, everything changes. Tools evolve, pottery emerges, social groups expand, food surpluses form, trade networks appear, conflict increases, art flourishes, religion takes shape, writing slowly starts. But the earliest villages older than Jericho, older than Çatalhöyük, are still unknown. Natural decay erased many. Floods buried others. Some lie beneath deserts, others beneath forests now reclaimed by nature. Civilization began in places we may never find. The paradox of the Holocene. You might think the recent past is easier to study, but the Holocene presents a unique problem. Humans changed the world too quickly for the world to preserve their changes. Burning forests destroys evidence. Intensive agriculture churns soil. Cities are built atop older cities. Floods bury settlements. Coasts drown. Fire consumes. War obliterates. Modern development paves over ancient ground. The more advanced we become, the harder it is to trace our early steps. The Holocene is the story of humanity taking control, but losing its own beginnings in the process. The dawn of written memory. Writing appears only in the last 5,500 years. Before that, 99.5% of human history. Everything was remembered only through stories, songs, rituals, oral traditions. When those voices fell silent, the memories vanished. Entire cultures lived, flourished, struggled, and disappeared without leaving a single written word. Their civilizations might have been complex. They might have been simple. They might have created art we will never see, stories we will never hear, technologies we will never rediscover. The Holocene preserves only fragments. We walk through this epoch with a flashlight, not a floodlight. The past is close, but the evidence is faint. The present approaches. As the Holocene progresses, humanity begins reshaping the earth, draining wetlands, domesticating animals, building irrigation canals, forming kingdoms, developing metallurgy, expanding trade routes, constructing monuments, and eventually, writing, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, philosophy, complex religion, literature, law, empires. Everything we call civilization blooms here. Yet the earliest chapters remain lost. The Holocene hides its own beginnings under layers of soil and time. We know who we are now. We know who we were recently. But the first 95% of our story remains faint, scattered, and quiet. A reminder that even in the warm embrace of the Holocene, the past still slips away, melted by the same forces that gave us a world fit for civilization. Now, to understand why the record breaks down so dramatically across all eras from dinosaurs to early mammals to humans, we drift into the physics of forgetting itself. Chapter 9. Why Fossils Fail. The Physics of Deep Time Erasure. By the time we arrive at Chapter 9, we are deep in the quietest part of this journey, the part where science itself whispers. We know almost nothing. People imagine Earth as a patient archivist, preserving history layer upon layer like a grand library of stone. But the truth is the opposite. Earth is constantly destroying its own memories. If you imagine the planet as a storyteller, then understand this. She is forgetful, utterly forgetful. Almost nothing she creates remains for long. To understand the gaps in the fossil record, we must enter the logic of deep time, a logic built not on preservation, but on destruction. The first truth: fossils are accidents, not records. Walk into a museum and you'll see dinosaurs standing proudly, mammoths towering over visitors, ancient fish fossilized perfectly on slabs of stone. It feels like fossils are common, but fossils are not the rule. They are the exception, an astonishing exception. For every one fossil, billions of organisms lived and died. Countless bones dissolved. Countless bodies disappeared. Countless histories vanished. If you went outside right now and looked at every bird, every insect, every dog or human in sight, ask yourself, how many of these will leave a fossil? The answer is almost zero. The requirements are impossible. To become a fossil, an organism must 1. Die in the right place. Most places are wrong. Mountainsides, forests, deserts, grasslands, hills, beaches. You must die. In a flood, in a mudslide zone, in a lagoon trime, in a lake bed, in a wet sediment trap, in volcanic ash, in tar pits, in oxygen-poor waters. 2. Be buried quickly. If scavengers eat you, no fossil. If weather scatters your bones, no fossil. If you rot, no fossil. 3. Avoid oxygen. Oxygen destroys bone. Fossils need low oxygen environments. 4. Undergo mineral replacement. Groundwater must carry minerals that infiltrate your bones. If the chemistry is wrong, no fossil. If the acidity is high, no fossil. If the sediment is too sandy, no fossil. 5. Survive geological violence. This is the hardest part. Even if you fossilize, you must survive. Earthquakes, continental drift, mountain building, volcanic eruptions, metamorphism, heat, pressure changing rock, erosion, subduction into the mantle. If any of these occur, your fossil returns to dust. 6. Be exposed at the right time. Erosion must uncover you, but not too early, or you erode. Not too late, or remain buried forever. 7. Be found by humans. The final miracle. A fossil is a message that survived every catastrophe for millions of years, only to wait for one species to notice it. The planet erases itself. Imagine a library containing 4 billion years of Earth history. Now imagine a fire burning every floor simultaneously, every hour, forever. That is the fossil record. The Earth does not archive, it recycles. Rock layers fold, melt, fracture, boil, uplift, collapse, and transform. Subduction. Entire continental margins slip into the mantle and melt. Everything on them, fossils, sediments, ancient ecosystems, gone permanently. Erosion. Mountains erode by inches each century, but over millions of years they vanish. Sediments wash into oceans. Fossils weather away. Nothing remains. Metamorphism. Heat and pressure reshape rock. Limestone becomes marble. Shale becomes slate. Fossils inside? Destroyed beyond recognition. Volcanism. Lava burns everything. Ash buries but also heats. Heat dissolves fossils. Glaciation. Ice sheets grind continents like sandpaper. Only the hardest rocks survive. Everything else becomes gravel. Soft-bodied creatures. The invisible majority. The fossil record favors hard parts. Bone, teeth, shells. But Earth's history includes billions of species without them. Jellyfish, worms, insects, plants, fungi, early soft-bodied animals, microbial mats, algae. We know they existed primarily because they must have existed. The tree of life is full of ghosts, with no bones, no shells, no armor, no way to fossilize, except in extremely rare conditions. Entire ecosystems are missing, like pages torn from a book. Behavior leaves no trace. A fossil is silent. It tells us nothing about color, sound, movement, social behavior, intelligence, mating rituals, parenting, communication, group structure. We look at dinosaur bones and guess at feathers. We look at early mammals and guess at their habits. We look at hominin bones and guess at minds. Behavior evaporates the moment life ends. Even with perfect bones, the story remains incomplete. Time doesn't record, it deletes. Every million years is a pulse of forgetting. Sediments compact. Rock layers tilt. Water seeps through. Tectonics distort. Earthquakes shatter. Continents drift. Ice advances. Ice retreats. Sea levels rise. Sea levels fall. Like waves erasing writing in sand. Deep time is not kind. It sands away the past granule by granule. Earth as a forgetful historian. When you look at the fossil record, imagine a biography written by someone who remembers 1% of events, forgets 99%, misremembers half of what remains, loses the pages regularly, rewrites sections with water stains, drops chapters into the ocean, burns older pages to make room for new ones. And yet, somehow, we still reconstruct stories from these scraps. We are detectives working with almost no clues. That is why the gaps are not embarrassing. They are expected. The miracle is not that the fossil record is incomplete. The miracle is that it exists at all. And now we arrive at the final chapter, a quiet reflection on mystery itself and what it means for humans to seek answers in a universe that keeps its secrets close. Chapter 10. The Eternal Mystery. What we will never recover. In this final chapter, we drift gently into the softest, deepest part of the story. Not the story of life, not the story of Earth, but the story of our relationship with the unknown. Because, after traveling through epochs of vanished forests, lost worlds, erased civilizations, and fragmentary fossils, one truth becomes clear. Most of Earth's history is gone, and it will never return. Perhaps that sounds sad, but perhaps it is something else. Something calming, something humbling, something beautifully human. Let's drift into that quiet truth together. The missing chapters. When you sit beside a campfire and watch sparks rise into the night's darkness, you might feel a little of what the earth feels when it forgets its past. Moments flare bright. They rise. They disappear. The darkness returns. History is like that. What we don't know includes 99.99% of all species, nearly all behavioral, most evolutionary transitions, the majority of early human cultures, ancient languages never written, migrations never recorded, tools carved from wood and fiber, oral traditions unspoken for millennia, oceanside settlements drowned forever, species that lived and died without leaving a trace mark. If Earth's history were a 1,000-page book, we have maybe 5 pages, scattered, smudged, incomplete. And yet we try to read the whole story from them. Why some mysteries will never be solved. Humans are wired to seek answers, to connect dots, to fill gaps, to tell stories. But deep time resists closure. Not because scientists are incompetent, not because we lack tools, not because we haven't looked hard enough, but because the evidence is truly gone. 1. Entire continents of fossils have been subducted. There is no way, no technology, no future innovation that can recover fossils melted deep within the mantle. They are erased. 2. Soft-bodied organisms decomposed instantly. No technology can resurrect the bodies of ancient jellyfish or worms from eras with no preservation. They are erased. 3. Ancient coastlines lie under hundreds of feet of ocean. Some may be recoverable. Most are buried under layers too deep to excavate. They are erased. 4. Early human tools, made of wood, left no trace. No satellite, no AI, no microscope can recover tools that vanished biologically. They are erased. 5. Oral traditions ended when their speakers died. Languages without writing evaporated the moment the last speaker fell silent. They are erased. Some mysteries stay mysteries because the universe designed it that way. The beauty of not knowing. As you listen, perhaps your eyelids grow heavier. Perhaps the room around you softens. Perhaps your mind settles slowly into that liminal space between knowing and dreaming. It is there, in that quiet threshold, that mystery becomes peaceful. If everything were known, if every fossil were complete, if every culture were documented, if every secret were visible, the world would lose something essential. Wonder, curiosity, possibility, imagination. Mystery is the blank canvas our minds paint upon. The gaps are not failures. They are invitations. Earth's history as a lullaby. Deep time is long. Long beyond comprehension. Long beyond numbers. Long beyond anything human. And yet, we walk through it gently, touching fragments, listening for echoes, piecing together stories from dust. It feels like reading a lullaby written in stone. Once upon a time, there were creatures you will never meet, forests you will never see, oceans that no longer exist, skies filled with birds whose wings will never beat again. We drift through that lullaby knowing we will never know everything, and that is okay, because the wonder lies in the searching, not in the finding. The final thought: we are temporary. 2. The same forces that erased the past are already erasing us. Our skyscrapers will fall. Our cities will crumble. Our metals will corrode. Our libraries will burn or decay. Our footprints will vanish. Our bones will dissolve. Our stories, too, will fade. The earth will forget us, just as it forgot the trilobites, and the creodonts, and the australopithecines, and the mammoths, and the Neanderthals. And yet, something will remain. Not our bodies, not our buildings, not our tools, but our curiosity, our desire to understand, our endless questions whispered into the dark. That, perhaps, is the most human thing of all. And now, rest. Let the vastness of time cradle you. Let the uncertainties soften your thoughts. Let the unanswered questions become gentle companions. The world has forgotten far more than it remembers, and still, life persists. Stories emerge, new wonders rise, new creatures walk, new mysteries form. It has always been this way. It will always be this way. Sleep, if you wish, or drift, or breathe softly, and let your mind wander across ancient oceans and forgotten forests. The gaps will still be here tomorrow, waiting patiently, quietly, peacefully, for us to explore again.
you.